Welcome everyone. My name is Yash, and I'm part of the design and dev team at OppHub. Today, we are very excited to announce, we are very excited to be hosting the second webinar for OppTalk series today. So for our meeting, we have a few guidelines that we want all of our attendees to follow. Firstly, we want all of our participants to use their full name as their display. Secondly, we would like to ask you to turn your cameras off. And finally, please message any questions through the Zoom chat function to me or to Josh, as we'll be asking them at the end of the call. So as you are probably aware, today Asma is speaking. So Asma is a first-year biochemistry student at McGill University. Originally from the GTA, she completed the IB program in high school and is currently involved in the First-Year Science Council, McGill Student Research Initiative, and the National Youth Profit Organization, PUMP. In her free time, she enjoys reading, playing the trumpet, and cooking. So today, Asma will be giving a 15-minute presentation, and then we'll move on to a Q&A session for another 15 minutes. So with that being said, let's jump right in. So please welcome to the stage, Asma. Asma, you can now take it away.
Thanks so much, Yash. Firstly, thank you so much for having me today. I'm super happy to have been given the opportunity to speak to all of you at OppTalks. And throughout this presentation, I'll just be talking a bit about my experiences, and I really look forward to answering any questions you have at the end. And so for that reason, I'll try to not go in depth on some of the things I'm going to talk about, but feel free to ask me about them later on, just so we can get a nice and long question period. I guess first and foremost, a bit about myself. Hello, I'm Asma, just as Yash said. I'm originally from Richmond Hill, Ontario. I attended Bayview Secondary School, if some of you know where that is. And I'm currently at McGill University. And so I'm a first-year student in the Life Sciences program. My major is biochemistry. And a bit about myself is that I am a musician, animal lover, and a food enthusiast. I really enjoy cooking in my free time. And so just as I said before, this is just an outline of what I'll be talking about today. So first, I'll talk a bit about my high school experiences. Then I'll move on to my university experiences and a bit about my program and why I chose it. And lastly, I'll talk a bit about some takeaways in terms of how to choose the activities that you do in high school and university, and just a bit about how to have a work-life balance, which I think is super important and will probably be a major theme in my talk today. So firstly, high school. As you know, I attended Bayview Secondary School. I was part of the IB program and received my diploma last summer. And so there were a couple of reasons why I chose the IB program. First and foremost, I love an academic challenge. And so having heard of the rigor of the program, I thought that it would be a great opportunity for me to build not only my knowledge, but also my study skills. And so that kind of ties into having time management skills and just being able to focus on school, but at the same time do activities. And so that really just appealed to me. Another reason why I chose it is because of the interdisciplinary aspects of the program. So for example, Theory of Knowledge, which is a philosophy style course that you take as an IB student, as well as the extended essay, which allows you the chance to just write about, a topic that interests you. For example, my extended essay was on absurdist literature. It was an English essay, and I had a lot of fun writing it. And so that was a major factor as well for me to choose the program. And lastly, something that's benefiting me now from having taken IB is the transfer credits. So I took higher level chemistry in IB. And so going into McGill, I was able to get transfer credits for 2 whole semesters of chemistry. And so from that, I now have the space to take extra electives or even fast track some of the chemistry courses in my program, which I find is really great. Several cons of the IB is that there's no elective room in high school. So in grades 11 and 12, all of your courses will be IB courses, and you don't get to choose music or gym or art or any other electives that you might also want to take. And I also put time management as a possible con. It can be hard to have too many commitments aside from school. But again, it depends on the person. And I guess for me, I found it to be quite enjoyable because of all these aspects, despite the time crunch of the program itself intrinsically. So getting a bit into some of the activities I did in high school, slash some of the ones that I'm still part of. PUMP and my musical activities are 2 of the major activities that I did. I'll be getting into each one of those. And so, as I previously mentioned, music is one of my hugest hobbies. And more than that, it's more of like a passion. You can see on the left, I did a lot of music related activities. I play a couple instruments. I'm an ARCT piano player. And at school, I play the trumpet in several music groups, as well as leading several of these groups. So I was the band manager for our jazz band. I was a section leader for our grade 12 wind symphony. And I was also part of music council, which meant that I get to help make decisions about events that the department was running and help plan them. Specifically, I ran the social media account for baby secondary school music. And I was also a music tutor and a music teacher, both at school and at home. And so you can really see that a lot of my activities were in depth into this passion that I had. And so this means a couple of things. So firstly, it shows commitment. I was involved in music for all 4 years of high school, and both before and afterwards. It's something that has always just been with me. And so I think committing to something that you enjoy doing and really going in depth into that activity is pretty important, not only because it shows, you have the opportunities to do leadership, which I'll get into in a second, but it also means you're enjoying your time. You don't want to be committing to something that you don't enjoy doing, and you're doing it just for the sake of like building your resume or because everyone else enjoys it. I would say to do activities that you enjoy. For me, that was music. And so being involved in it for so long allowed me to take leadership in a couple ways, which was very rewarding. So not only was I able to play music, but I was able to, make decisions about, my section playing music, for example, taking the initiative to hold sectionals or rehearsals, making choices about repertoire, and again, as part of music council, making decisions on the promotion of events and the nature of such events. And so it was a very enriching experience to be so in-depthly part of this department of my high school. And it's something that I really enjoy doing. And so the next thing I'll get into is PUMP. So PUMP is short for Prospective Medical Professionals. We're a registered charity, actually, and we operate nationally across Canada. So we have a national branch, but also a Toronto branch, Vancouver branch, and Calgary branch. It's a super great organization. I would definitely check it out on Instagram and Facebook if you have the time. And so basically what PUMP does is that we make opportunities more accessible for students who are looking to enter STEM and more specifically like the healthcare field and the sciences. And so I started out in PUMP in grade 10. I was a logistics officer. The organization had just started out. And so I stuck with it for a really long time. I am still part of PUMP today as the vice president. And so you can see how throughout the years I was able to take on more and more activities. So at first I was just a logistics officer. I was responsible for communication with different institutes and different speakers and organizations, and also for planning events. And so that really led me to develop my organization skills and also teamwork. And throughout the years, I got to be logistics co-head, and now I'm vice president of the national branch of PUMP. And so one of the things I really enjoy about being part of the organization, aside from just, the organization, the management, and having to be on top of like the events running, is also the teamwork. I've met so many amazing people through PUMP, and I've gotten to know a lot of them as more than just coworkers. I can say that a lot of them are my friends. And so I think that that's such a huge aspect of the activities you do. Just connecting with the people and maintaining those connections, I think is something that can last you even after you maybe finish an activity. You can still be in touch with the people you're working with. And I think that's really great. And again, similar to music, I think leadership is a huge aspect of it. Just being able to commit to an activity, stick with it for a long time and work hard if it's something you enjoy. And at the end of the day, you can get to even have more of a say in how the activity runs. So those are two of the main things I did. I did a couple of side things as well. So I was part of DECA, which is a very prominent business club / organization that runs throughout North America and even worldwide. And so I was part of DECA for all 4 years of high school. I competed in hospitality, and I got to go to many different levels of competition. I was also a trainer for 3 years of my DECA experience. And so that really taught me public speaking and problem solving. So even as someone who knew early on that I didn't really want to go into business as a career, I still stuck with it because of the commitment that I'd made, and also because it allowed me the opportunity to learn for presentations and learn how to solve problems on the spot, especially since I competed in orals, which meant I did case studies with only 10 minutes of preparation. So again, I really enjoyed DECA despite not having gone into business. And so my last two activities are a volunteer at the animal hospital and Taekwondo. So I started volunteering at the animal hospital at the end of grade 11. So I volunteered there for just over a year before COVID prevented me from volunteering there anymore. But I really enjoy this activity because I love animals. Again, I mentioned this at the beginning for a reason. I have a couple of cats. I've always enjoyed just working with animals in general. And so I thought it would be a great experience, which it was. And so it was even more of a good experience because I was able to apply knowledge from my science classes. So a lot of the activities I did, aside from just cleaning and walking like the dogs and cats and things like that, we're also doing, for example, dilutions or helping with medications. And so my knowledge of chemistry and biology really came in handy. And as someone who was considering a future in the medical field or in the sciences in general, I found it to be a very telling experience. And it helped me determine whether or not I wanted to be a vet in the future. So even though I decided that maybe being a vet wasn't the career for me, I still found it to be a good experience just because I was able to narrow down my career path and at the same time have this great experience that I still think about sometimes today and have learned many lessons from. Last but not least, I did Taekwondo. I'm actually a second degree black belt. I really enjoy Taekwondo because it helps with physical health. I think that maintaining your health throughout anything that you do is super important. And so for me, whenever I work out, I get really focused afterwards when I sit down to study. So I really recommend having a balance of activities. So whether it's doing a sport or like going for a run regularly, try to take care of your health as you're doing all the things that you're doing, and it'll be better for yourself. You'll thank yourself in the future. So now I'm going to get into university, which is where I am now. I've only been here for a semester and a bit, but I've involved myself in a couple of activities. But firstly, I'm going to talk about why I'm at McGill and why I chose my program. So I applied to a couple of universities throughout Canada, mainly some in Ontario because that was my home province. So initially, I applied to a few, but at the end, I was deciding between McGill's life sciences / biomedical program, the U of T life science, and Western medical science. And so the reason I chose McGill is because firstly, the city of Montreal. So I find cities to have a lot of really great opportunities. And the added bonus of Montreal is that French is a language that's spoken here. And as someone who took standard level French as part of my IB diploma, I really didn't want to let go of all these skills that I built up. I love languages. I'm quadrilingual. I really didn't want to forget how to speak French. And so the environment was a huge factor for me, even though the university itself is English. So you learn everything in English just to clear up any confusion anyone might have. Most people in the city are bilingual. So you can go to the stores and speak in English, like it's completely fine. But if you wanted to, you could definitely practice your French skills. And that was, for me, something that was pretty important. The next thing I have here is research and other opportunities. So again, it being a city, there's a lot of different universities here. I think there's at least 3 or 4, in addition to McGill, that are all on the island of Montreal, and many other opportunities in the forms of hospitals, research labs, and even ones outside of a career-based institute. For example, I'm looking to get involved in a musical activity here, and there are a ton of different orchestras and symphonies throughout the city. So if one wanted to join any of those, it would be a great opportunity to do so. And research is actually a huge aspect of learning at McGill. There's a huge emphasis on research as part of a degree. In fact, that kind of leads me to the next point, which is degree flexibility. So at McGill, even though you might be doing a life sciences major, there are so many different majors you can choose from within the life sciences stream. So I chose biochemistry, but you could have chosen pharmacology, anatomy and cell biology, kinesiology, psychology, immunology. There are definitely a few more that I'm missing, but there are just so many specializations. I find it to be really refreshing. So you can go into something that you find personally engaging and take courses that are related to that. And there's a lot of options to add either minors to your degree or to do an honors degree. So what honors means is that you take more courses that are related to your major specifically instead of electives. So for example, if I were to do honors biochemistry, I would declare that in my 2nd or 3rd year. And in my last couple of years, I'd be taking more courses related to biochemistry. And so one would want to take honors if you're interested in graduate school, as it gives you more chances to be in a lab or to do independent research projects. And also if you're super interested in that field and you want to choose more courses in your major as opposed to doing other electives or taking a couple spares. So just that flexibility in general really drew me to the program as opposed to more of like a rigid program, especially since I have so many different interests in courses and subject matter. For example, with my electives this year, I chose to take lower intermediate Arabic for both semesters. So I get to learn a language, and it's pretty refreshing to have a course that's not a science course as well, because it just gives you like that balance in what you're learning. And last but not least, I chose McGill because of the potential for new experiences. Again, it was a different province from where I'm from originally. I just thought it would be super cool to try something new, meet a lot of new people. McGill attracts a lot of international students and people from a lot of different places. And I thought that it would be the perfect place to, starting fresh would not be the right way to say it, but just, be in a new place, have a lot of new things to do, and putting myself a bit out of my comfort zone to, I guess, forge a path in this new city. I guess the reason I chose biochemistry is because I find it personally very interesting to look at the mechanisms of how different bodily functions work, which is why I chose it over a degree such as anatomy. And as well, it's a very good field for someone who still isn't really sure what they want to go into. I say that because biochemistry is a great starting point for a career in research, healthcare, or public policy. So if you're undecided, you could do a biochemistry undergraduate degree and still be able to go to, for example, a graduate school for research. You could still go into medical school if you wanted to, or pursue a master's degree in public policy or health policy. And I also chose it because it's a interdisciplinary scientific field. I see a question in the chat. I'll answer that shortly, or actually at the end of my presentation, but thank you for asking. So I chose it because being in biochemistry, you get to take courses from a lot of different sciences. So you take biochemistry courses, of course, but you also take a couple of anatomy courses, physiology courses, immunology. So I would say it's a pretty well-rounded scientific discipline. And so that interested me, which is why I chose it. All right, a couple of the things I do right now. Firstly, I'm part of the first year undergraduate science society, or FUS for short. I'm the co-president of that council, and we work on creating events for the first years in science and making them feel like they're part of the community. So one of the initiatives we're currently running is a study group initiative where people fill out a Google form with certain courses that they want to be in a study group for, and you put groups together and pair them with upper year mentors, so they get to study together, have a mentor they can talk to about questions or about life in general at McGill. And that's just one of the initiatives we've run. I get to work with a super amazing council of a couple other first years. And so that's really helped with my collaboration and responsibility, as well as leadership. And I think one of the hugest parts of it now is that with everything online, our council has such a huge role in making sure everyone feels included. And so there's a lot of different considerations you have to take into account. Even something like time zones when we're planning activities are all things that we do. And so I find that super enjoyable. And I'm also part of a club called Student Research Initiative. I'm the VP of External Affairs, so I work on getting sponsorships for our organization. But essentially, again, I've gotten to meet a lot of super great upper years in that program. For example, a couple of students in biochemistry in their third or fourth years, so I've been able to kind of speak to them about my program, which is always really nice. And we've also gotten to do event planning, which is always a great skill to have in terms of organization and initiative, and just staying on top of your time. And so a couple of my future plans, I was going to volunteer at the Montreal General Hospital this semester. Unfortunately, it got canceled due to COVID, so they postponed my volunteering shift. Hopefully, I'll get to do that soon. And I've also obtained a summer research internship for the summer. I've gotten offers from both the Huang Lab and the Fawn Lab, which are two labs at McGill. Both of them specialize in neuroscience. If you're interested, you can always read up on those two labs. I think their work is super cool, but that's just some ideas of what I'm going to be up to for the next couple of months. I know that obtaining a summer position is something that is not very easy to do. It took a lot of work for me to get these two offers, a lot of emailing, a lot of research. So if you have questions about that, then definitely let me know. A couple of takeaways before we get to the question period is, firstly, do what you enjoy. So I talked about this a bit when I was talking about music. I think it's pointless to do an activity if you don't really enjoy what you're doing. Like if you choose to take on a club that you don't personally feel invested in, I think that you could definitely choose a more meaningful activity. And so I would focus less on trying to be like the perfect student and focusing more on trying to be someone who has clubs that cater to their own interests. So don't join a club just because everyone else is in it, or because you think that this is what universities want to see. I would choose clubs and activities that you feel enrich your time and try to find leadership opportunities therein. That leads me to quality over quantity. So I would say choose a few fields or activities that you enjoy and go into depth in those rather than being a member of like 50 different clubs. You're going to be happier for it as well, just because you'll have to manage your time between less activities and find more fulfillment in only a couple of things. Time management is huge. The work-life balance is something that is not easy to maintain. It took me a while to get to that point as well. But just remembering that, school is one thing, extracurriculars are another thing, but living your life is something that is arguably a separate category than those things, right? You need time to sleep, you need time to eat, you need time to, do your hobbies, de-stress, things like that. And so it's something that I've realized the importance of later on in my high school/university career, but I would say to not underestimate. And the last 2 points are, firstly, maintain your personal and professional relationships. I talked about meeting a lot of great people through all my activities, and I still keep in touch with a lot of them today. For example, when I volunteer at the vet clinic, I met a couple of the uni students who are working there. I still keep in touch with a few of them. And from all of my clubs, I think it's super great to build that network and think of it as more than networking, right? Like you're really building relationships with these people, and you can find a lot of personal satisfaction from that, which I think is great. And lastly, I put mental health on there because it may seem like you have to do like a million things in order to, build your resume or to, get into the program you want. And I would argue against that. I would say that while it's great to work hard and you should be working hard, I would also say to keep in mind your mental health. I know these times are especially tough. I know everyone says that, but just make sure that you're thinking of your own needs as well. So right before I end my presentation, I just want to end with this quote from one of my favorite authors, John Steinbeck. This quote is from his novel East of Eden, which I highly recommend. And so the quote says, "And now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good." And so the reason I put this on here is because there's this huge conception that you need to make yourself the perfectly well-rounded student. You need to be class president, valedictorian. You need to be leading like all these clubs. You need to have clubs in all of these areas, and you have to have perfect grades. And I think that that mindset is super overwhelming, and it can make you have unrealistic expectations for the way that things are going to go. And so again, this kind of ties into what I was saying before about not striving to be that perfect mold of what you think the university is going to look for. I would just focus on being good, being happy with what you do, finding self-actualization in those activities, and just focusing on meeting your own needs for activities and also for health. And these two things don't have to be completely separate. You can be a super great student leader doing activities you enjoy, but I would say to just remember your own interests rather than trying to do a bunch of things that you're not personally invested in. And so on that note, I end my presentation. Thanks again for having me. It was super great to talk to all of you. Here's my email and Instagram in case anyone wants to reach out to me with questions. But at this point, I guess we can open the floor up to questions anyone might have. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that presentation, Asma. I really liked how you talked about your high school experience and how you carried those interests into university. I think a lot of the people here took a lot of value from that. So thank you so much. So now we're gonna move on to our Q&A session. We're a bit over time, so I think we're only gonna ask a few questions, and then we'll get some questions from the chat as well. So first question we have here is, what was the topic of your supplementary application if you had one? So
Right,
topic, yeah.
Right, so McGill doesn't actually have a supplementary, but I had to fill one out for a scholarship application. And so for that one, I wrote about one of the topics was something about a struggle that I had to overcome. So I talked about my name and how a lot of people either have teased me for it in the past. And so that was kind of like a self-struggle topic where I talked about coming to terms with my identity. I can go into more depth if anyone is interested.
Yeah, that's great. Then the next question we have is, do you have any tips for high school students who are looking for a future in biochemistry?
Right, so I would just say first and foremost to keep your options open and look into if biochemistry is the field for you, just because there's so many specializations in science. And so if you think that that's something you want to do, then I would look into doing activities where you can put yourself in that environment. For example, trying to get into a research lab where you can kind of see hands-on what a biochemist would do and go from there.
Yeah, thank you. And then the last question we're going to ask is, what does a typical day look like for you, especially during COVID?
Right, so that's a super great question. Nowadays, I've been trying to wake up pretty early, so I wake up at around 8:30. eat breakfast, I usually get the most of my work done in the morning. For example, on the weekends, I would do a couple of hours of work. I usually take a break for lunch and exercise in the afternoon. And in the evening, I do another shorter chunk of work. Usually in the morning, I work for maybe like 4 to 6 hours. It really depends on like how much work I have. The afternoon, I do like a bit less work. So maybe I would work from like 10 to 2, eat lunch, and then work again from like 4 to 7 or 4 to 8, cook dinner usually. And depending on how much work I have, I either would just relax in the evening or I would try to finish up any loose ends. For me, chunking time works really well. So that's normally what I do.
All right. So now I think we should take the time to answer some questions from chat. Do you want to just read them out and just answer them?
Sure thing. Actually, I can't seem to access the chat anymore. If you could read them to me, that would be super great.
Sure. So the first question we have is, do you have any tips for people moving out for university or going to a new city?
Right, so that's a really great question. At first, I would say that it can be a little bit isolating just because you're in a new place all by yourself. I didn't know a lot of people here. Like from my high school, only about 3 or 4 people went to McGill, and it's not like they live right beside me or anything, so I can't really see them very often. So I would say it's really important to build a strong network of friends and family that you can always call, like if you're feeling down or if you're feeling lonely in the evenings or things like that. And another thing is I would really try to get to know the city and the resources that are available to you. For example, knowing where like the grocery stores are, knowing where the convenience stores or like the Dollarama are. I think that's really important too, just because if you need something, you have to know like where to go and what's going to take you the least amount of time. So before I moved to Montreal, I was on Google Maps looking up like where the grocery stores were and where all these important places were, just so that, when the time comes where I have to rush to get something, I wouldn't be spent like worrying about where to find it.
All right. So then I think we only have 2 more minutes left for the call. So I'm just going to go through this next question. How do you manage your time effectively? So like, how have you managed your time effectively?
So I think a big part of it is self-discipline and also self-control. I personally use an agenda, so I write down everything that I have to do on a given day, slotting in any meetings or classes or things like that. And I build my work schedule around that. I think a big part of it is knowing how much time each activity is going to take, or like setting yourself a maximum amount of time that you want to spend doing something. For example, if you know you can get a project done in 2 hours, give yourself 2 hours. You might at the end be done, but not be as happy with the product. For example, you might think, oh, I can rewrite this paragraph just to be like a little bit better. I would say a huge part of managing time is just, taking those 2 hours, coming back to it later if you have time, but really trying to stick to times that you allot for certain activities, because I think it's super easy to spend way too many hours on a certain activity that doesn't need that many hours.
All right. And then our final question for today is from Seba H. And they ask, did you know that you always want to do something in the sciences?
That's a really great question, because the answer is no, I did not know. When I was applying to programs, I actually applied to a couple of music programs as well. I think what led me to choose science is the fact that just being in science doesn't mean I have to give up all my other interests, right? I can still take electives in things I enjoy or find interesting, or do like hobbies on the side that relate to that. And I think a big part of it also was me volunteering at the clinic, and also being a part of organizations that were related to STEM, for example, PUMP. And so just being in that sort of environment, I guess, led me to my decision and to feel that it was the right field for me. So any advice for people who still don't know, I would say do activities that put you in that environment, look into, I guess, how the career path of that field would go, and just see if you can picture yourself there or not, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. So thank you, Asma, for that amazing presentation, and thank you to the attendees for all of your questions as well. Hope you all enjoyed something and learned something new. Just a reminder, we have Freeman from U of T speaking next week at the same time, so make sure you sign up for that if you haven't already. If you want to watch the webinar the webinar or any of our future ones, make sure to check out the recordings, which we post on our website. And feel free to follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook, at OppTalk Official for the latest updates on our initiatives. So with that being said, thank you, Asma, and thank you everyone for joining this meeting. Thank you, guys.